Welcome to the fifth and final Life of a Book panel session. As those who have been with us all week will know by now, I'm Kirstine Bell. I'll give a quick audio description. I am a white woman in her 40s with long, straight dark hair and glasses, and I am in the virtual background of the stone-walled living room in the main house at Moniac Moor. I look after projects at Moniac Moor, Scotland's Creative Writing Centre, and it has been a real joy for us to bring to life the idea for these sessions, which was first developed by Creative Scotland and is funded through Creative Scotland's National Lottery Fund and is also being supported by Hawthornden Foundation through Society of Authors. So the aim of these discussions has been to demystify the journey of creating a book, from writing it through querying and working with agents and publishers to what happens after the book has been published and how we can co-create a community that supports writers at every stage. I'm really looking forward to today's panel on the topic of how we build community. And in a moment, I'll be welcoming Harry, Josephine Giles, Marjorie Lotfi, Jeda Pearl and Heather Parry as chair. But before I hand over to Heather, please bear with me for a wee bit of online housekeeping. And if you are watching the recording or have heard me say this in all the previous sessions, thank you for your patience. To view the captions, select the CC icon along the very bottom of the Zoom screen and select Show Captions, or you can select Hide Captions to switch it off. Alternatively, if you click the wee dots or arrow beside the CC icon, you can choose to view transcript and it will show the transcript in a separate window. The events are being recorded. As this is a webinar, the audience is not visible to the panelists and are not being recorded, and your video and mic are automatically switched off. The recordings will be available on Moniac's website a few weeks after the event, and there will be BSL interpretation added to the recordings. Also, any books, websites, podcasts and the like that are referenced during the discussion will be compiled and added to the transcript of the event and will be available with the recording, and we'll notify everyone when those are available. My colleague Pauline Cowell is here as tech support. I'm pointing that way, but actually she could be anywhere on the screen for you guys. But if you have any technical difficulties during the event, you can contact her either using the chat or the email or phone number that she will drop into the chat now. And if for any reason there's any connection issues with the internet, please do just try and rejoin on the same link. We may not be able to see you all, but we would really love to hear from you. Along the bottom of your screens, you will see a Q&A function and a chat function. The Q&A will open halfway through the discussion for any additional questions directly to the panel, and we'll do our best to pick up as many as we can. And we would love to hear any comments or reactions in the chat as we go along. So I'm done, you'll be glad to hear. And I'd love now to introduce you to our chair for the panel, Heather Parry. Heather is editorial director of Extra Teeth magazine and co-created the Illustrated Freelancers Guide with artist Maria Stoyan. She is the author of the novel Orpheus Builds a Girl and a short story collection, This Is My Body Given for You. And her first non-fiction book, Electric Dreams on Sex, Robots and the Failed Promises of Capitalism, fabulous title, came out in March. So welcome, Heather, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirstine. I couldn't remember the subtitle of that book yesterday, so you did better than me. As Kirstine mentioned in that lovely introduction, my name is Heather Parry. I'm a Glasgow-based writer and editor. And for those of you using audio description, I'm a white woman who looks very pink because of the pink walls of my office. I'm wearing dark black-rimmed glasses and I have very short red hair. If a cat appears behind me, his name is Ernesto and he is just a black cat. We've got three fantastic panelists today, so without further ado, let me introduce them to you. Harry Josephine Giles is from Orkney and lives in Leith. Her first novel, Deep Will Arcadia, which was published by Picador in October 2021 and won the 2022 Arthur C. Clarke Award for Science Fiction Book of the Year. She has a PhD in creative writing from Stirling. Her show Drone debuted in the Made in Scotland showcase at the 2019 Edinburgh Fringe and toured internationally. Hello, Josie. Lovely to have you with us. Marjorie Lotfi is an Iranian-American who has lived in the UK for over 20 years. Her writing considers displacement, home and belonging, particularly relating to the lives of refugees and migrants. She is a winner of the inaugural James Berry Prize, and her first collection, The Wrong Person to Ask, was published by Blood Axe Books in October 2023. She's a co-founder and director of Open Book and a co-chair of the board of trustees for Stanza, Scotland's International Poetry Festival. Hello, Marjorie, how are you? I'm asking people questions when they're muted, so that's not helpful, is it?
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Jeda Pearl is co-director of the Scottish BPOC Writers Network, a professional development and advocacy organisation by and for Black writers and writers of colour from, based in, or with a strong connection to Scotland. She is a Scottish Jamaican poet and a spec fiction writer based in Edinburgh. Hello, Jeda. So lovely to have you with us today. As you can hear from those bios, the three panelists today have got a lot of experience bringing writers together, representing writers, helping other writers, as well as running their own careers. So I'm hoping that we're going to have like a really warm, helpful, informal chat today. We're going to have about 10-15 minutes for questions at the end, and I think Christine is going to open the Q&A function about halfway through the event, so you can just pop them into the Q&A by clicking on the Q&A button on the bottom of your panel screen window, Zoom window. You think we'd have learned all the words by now, but I haven't. So enough from me. I was hoping that I could ask you guys, first of all, kind of who your writing community consists of. So is it that you have some WhatsApp groups, chats with random writer friends? Is it that you are involved with genre-based groups or shared experience groups or activist groups? Basically, can you speak a little bit about how you found your communities, and did you struggle to do so at the start of your career? Whoever feels like going first.
Okay, I'll go. Jeda speaking. So just a quick audio description. I am a mixed race woman in my 40s. I have long curly brown hair going to by my shoulders, and in the background, the wall is like a teal, like a sort of under the sea kind of colour, and there's also you can see a bit of an embroidered wall hanging on the wall. So yeah, I would say to begin with, I did really struggle. I felt really isolated, and I think the very first way I kind of reached out to any other writers, so this is like back in like probably 2009 or something, was maybe through an online forum, which I can't even remember the name of. And people would like share their writing and give feedback to each other's writing on there. So just like in a sort of voluntary capacity. So that was, I suppose, where when I first started reaching out, but I still felt it probably took me about like 3 years before I could actually say I'm a writer. I found even just claiming that title quite tricky. And then in 2018, I applied for a little short sort of 5-day residency in Arvin course that was all for Black people and people of colour that were working on like a long form manuscript. And that was the first time outside of my own family that I had been surrounded by other people of colour, so from a shared experience, and I felt it was a really nurturing experience to be in as a writer, and I was like, I need something like this back home, because that was like down in England. And lo and behold, the Scottish BPOC Writers Network was already in existence, so I managed to come across, I think it was the Writers of Colour Poetry Group, and that was my kind of way in, and since then I've maybe found some communities like in Facebook groups. So there's a few different ones. Sometimes it's like wider creatives and not just purely writers. For example, for disabled writers, there's a group called the Crypt Collective, which is on Facebook. And then places like Disability Arts Online. And just through like, I'm partially housebound, so I can't like go to like loads of events, and I have to kind of space out my activities. But the occasional times I manage to, kind of in fear, those first few times kind of go along to like open mic nights and things like that, those have also been places to kind of start finding community in person.
can see Pauline's doing an incredible job of dropping links to all the things you're mentioning, Jeda, in the chat as well, so people should be able to look those up straight away. Marjorie or Josie, do you want to share yours as well?
Yeah, it's oh, first, sorry, a wee description just before I launch into the answer. So I'm white. I have mid-length wavy brown hair and blue eyes, and I'm wearing some quite large maroon-rimmed glasses that are very annoyingly reflecting the ring light. So it's sorry about the weird flashy circles. There's nothing we can do about it. You might I'm in my I'm secretly, it's not secret. I'm in my bedroom at the moment, so you can see just some bits of bedroom furniture in the background. And that is me. So it's attending this panel discussion at this point in my life is quite a funny one for me, because for the first 10 years of my writing career, I would say I was very, very active in community building. I did a lot of running of events. I co-founded an open mic called Inky Fingers that ran for a very long time and hosted that for a very, very long time. Organized writers groups, was also very active online and such. And that was really important to me, and it is still really important to me that I did all of that. And doing those things very actively was very helpful in meeting other writers and establishing a career and finding forms of support and learning and all of that. And then in the last few years, I've been increasingly in a period of sort of retreat where I'm not as around and I'm not as available, and I spend a lot more time by myself. I'm not running events. I'm not regularly doing organizing things, and those are very, very deliberate choices. And on the one hand, I'm kind of able to do that because I do have a bit of a career and a bit of a writing community around that. And on the other hand, I'm kind of experimenting with what can happen and what kind of writing I can do when things are a little bit quieter and I'm not quite so active. I do have friends that I send writing to. I think the friendship group that most often gets my writing is my weekly board games group, who also all happen to be writers. It's very funny. We meet every week, we play board games, and we don't talk about literature, which is another way that community can continue. We've all known each other for a really long time, and we've been playing board games together for 4 years. 4 years. Since the start of 2020, and that has become my like people to send writing to, which is a really nice thing to have, and we do that for each other as well. So I think it's important to, as we talk about all these community building efforts that we're going to, it's important to remember you don't have to don't have to do all of that, and there's value in other things, and also sometimes a community is just your friends, and that can also be enough for you too.
I'll jump into, thanks for that, Josie. I have a similar trajectory, except that I'm back to thinking I need to couple together another little community, a very small one. But I started out building it. So I think that's probably going to be a big message for me today, which is if you don't have a community of people around you that you can share work with, just build it. And it's not complicated, you know, you can, in the sense that there are really easy formats to work out how you're going to do a crit group, which is effectively how many people in the room you've got and how much time you've got, and set a timer. But, you know, originally I wasn't sure how to manage it. And so I just invited people that I thought would be interesting, largely kind, not people who wrote like me, but kind people who I thought would give me honest feedback. People I didn't know, sort of half it. And it was amazing to me that they all said yes. And we met, and then, you know, that developed. And as that group kind of moved on, I built another one. And even over COVID, someone asked me to be part of their half a dozen people that were meeting online. And so I think that it's important to have people that you can feel you can send things to, because it's scary, I think, to know where you are in the world. And also just have someone say, yes, it's ready to send out, or I would hang on to that for a little bit longer. So my thing is to build a community, a smaller community for yourself. that will give you some confidence or some feedback as you need it, but then also engage, which we can talk about in a much wider community, as both Josie and Jeda have been talking about, going to events online or otherwise. But that I would say just build it. Just ask people. It's amazing that they say yes.
Jeda, just so we know, do you have a crit group as well? Do you have a group of writers that you send your writing to and you workshop with them or get feedback?
Not a regular crit group. No, I don't. Yeah, haven't. There's one I'd like to join, but it's more been like capacity and time. So really, but yeah, that's something I think that's a near future thing that will happen. So yeah.
I think that is a good point about capacity, because I know sometimes, especially when you're a bit younger, you can join crit groups or you can form crit groups where you're like, we share some work every week, and then you have to earn some money, or you have some children, or you have if things happen and you can't keep up with that. So like my workshop group, for instance, we only really meet when someone's got some work that they need to share, or a new book or a new short story or whatever it is they're working on. So I think it's really good to know that you can shape it around what you need it to be as well. And like you said, Marjorie, just reaching out to people. Like I think our crit group was formed from us all just saying, oh, wouldn't it be amazing to get this person involved, because we really like their work and they seem cool. We met them in a cafe, or at an event or something. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for building.
Even though I wrote myself a note to tell to do an audio description, I didn't. So if you've been listening, I'm a Iranian American woman in my 50s with, it's the theme today, brown shoulder length curly hair in a blue top, but I have absolutely nothing behind me, a white background. And let me just jump in and say there are moments for these, as Josie has said, but also moments I've had windows where I haven't had them. And I've also had windows when I've turned up to my group with nothing and just been there to listen and to provide that feedback. And that is a sort of community that really matters too. To just being engaging in other people's work, I think is almost more valuable than having people engage with yours.
For sure. So we've touched a little bit on the idea of kind of building. And I think perhaps we'll talk about the potential downsides to that. Josie, you mentioned it a little bit, the idea of the kind of fatigue of running things and the way that things can encroach on your actual creative work. I'm sure we'll get into that. But what does it mean to kind of actively build community with other writers, do we think?
I think you have to think first about what you want and what you want in your life. What is the thing that you need and want in your life? And then you second have to look around and see what's already there. Because sometimes what you want actually already exists and you can just go along and that's quite nice. And then you look for a place to slot in and support and figure out what your own talents and capacities are within that and whether there's anything you can do to help. And if it doesn't exist, as Marjorie says, you find a way to build it. Often that's best done with a couple of other people. I would say that almost every organization I've ever done, and a lot of the creative projects I've done have come about because I met somebody and we had a conversation, and one of us said, well, why don't we just do it? Why don't we just do it? You're in a pub and you're complaining that there's no regular platform for experimental performance art in Edinburgh, and then you go, well, I suppose we'll just make one then. Let's do that. And ideally you have the skills between you to make it happen. I have often been I'm very organized as a person and I'm very good at emails. So I'm often like the engine of administration for projects. That's my forte. I'm not particularly good at design. I'm not particularly good at the sort of in-person social stuff. So often I've sought out people that are good at those things for helping out with the project. And knowing, not trying to do everything and knowing what you're not good at, knowing what your limitations are is also really important. I think on the one hand, building community is about giving generously of yourself, because when you do that, people are around and people give to you in return when you need it, or when you ask, or when you want it, you know. So yeah, it's partly offering what you have to offer to other people. And then on the other hand, it's also, if you want to do it in a lasting way, it's about paying attention to your own capacities and your own limits and your own boundaries, and looking after those. Because if you do look after those, if you know when to say, I'm doing enough now, if you know when to say, I'm too tired and I should probably not do another thing right now, then the projects that you get involved in are more sustainable and more long lasting. And so is your life and your writing as well.
That's an amazing point.
Can I jump in on the back of that too? I agree with everything Josie said about capacity. I think you're catching writers at a particular stage in our sort of community building. And as someone who sort of built and runs Open Book, I completely agree with that. I think in the early days, an important thing to do is to try lots of things, including things that you might think are not for you, whether that's speculative fiction or poetry, or, you know, anything that you think, oh, I'm not an essayist, I'm not a memoirist. I would suggest just dipping into things that are available to try and see what fits, because it's always a shock to me what comes out, you know, and I think it could, you know, lead in a different direction. But I echo that idea of boundaries and capacity, because the danger, of course, is that we give ourselves away in the process and end up empty. And of course, you have to save something for yourself in your writing too. So there is that danger of doing way too much. And in my experience, there's an awful lot available. There's not a dearth of stuff. There's too much stuff. So choosing really matters.
I think as well, knowing when to kind of join up with people who are already doing some work rather than starting a new thing of your own is also a really strong kind of consideration. And what you've both kind of mentioned about doing things to your own strengths, and also knowing when things have changed to an extent that you might need someone new in to tackle something new. So Jeda, I'm sure you might have a comment on this. If you start a project and you get to the point where you kind of have to be applying for funding, applying for funding is so horrible. If you've never written a budget and you've never had to write a business plan and you've never run a company or anything like that, that can become, I think, really overwhelming straight away. So having a larger pool of people who really believe in the project and want to help and have different skills, I think is so helpful. Is that what you found in the BPOC network as well?
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, the first time we applied for funding, it was, you know, none of us had done that before. So before I talk about that, the one thing I wanted to add was about, one thing I've learned is if we put ourselves just even a little bit out of our comfort zone sometimes, like with that thing of experimenting with you know, different things, or, you know, whether that's like putting yourself forward for an open mic night and then you're absolutely terrified because it's the first time you've read something. And that terror continues to happen even when you've more experience. But yeah, I think that's like, it's good to kind of push yourself out your comfort zone a little bit, because the capacity you have from a creative perspective, you've actually got a wealth of it inside you, but to access that, sometimes you need to kind of try something that you've maybe not done before, or be in an environment which is new. But yeah, I think with so going back to, yeah, you know, this thing where you're like applying for funding. So if you are in a, you know, if you are starting something or wanting to, or you've joined an organization that's already, you know, it's just voluntary, and but maybe some of the group are like, oh, let's do this, but we're going to need funding to do that. It's also okay to kind of reach out to organizations that are already in existence and you know, talk to them about that. You know, the organizations that have already been funded, or, you know, they're just because someone might actually be like, yes, I've got some time, I can, you know, kind of give you some pointers on what's good to include. Or I think certainly I would, like, I, even still kind of I'm quite hesitant about reaching out to other writers, for example, and asking, for, would you be interested in looking at this? But I think there's a way you can make an ask, even if it's someone that you don't really know, you've not approached before, but there's a way you can kind of make that ask to just to kind of say, to give them an out. So if they are stretched and they don't have the time, then they can be like, I'm really sorry, I'm not available to that just now. But maybe try this organization or try this person. So it can be really good to reach out, even if someone's not able to help you in that moment. I think I just went way off topic there. Sorry.
No, that's perfect.
Can I just add to that even just quantifying how much time you're going to need, because as Open Book, we often get this request from other organizations because we've been doing the funding for a while as well. Not that we're experts at it, but because we've done it in various ways. So saying, could I have a half an hour of your time to ask you some specific questions about how you handled this? Or the other option, as a writer, if you just want to do a solo project, to quantify that time really helps. But also, I know Literature Alliance often does a bit of mentorship support. I know because I've helped people on the other end who have been given time with someone to talk about how they might structure an application and what to include. So there are also opportunities that, like through Literature Alliance Scotland or otherwise, who will connect you with people who might give you some time.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd actually like to kind of jump off that point that Jeda made about like how you ask for help generally as a writer, without making the person that you are asking feel like you aren't seeing them as a person. Like the last thing you want to do is make someone feel like they're a kind of ladder in your career. They're a step on your career ladder is what I meant to say. But often we do need help from other writers. So like when you get to the point of publication, you might need to ask them for a blurb, or you might need a reference, or a character reference or anything like this. So when it comes to that, can you think of any kind of tips for people to reach out without kind of making the person that they're asking for help from feel negative about it in any way? I think the point about saying how long something might take is a really good one as well, Marjorie. That if you say, oh, can you just give me 5 minutes for this, or can I ask you one question or something?
I would encourage people, don't use somebody as a ladder. Like that's the first step. Like, be honest with yourself. Like, are you ready to give something back? Like, will you do a favor in return? Or will you pass it on to somebody else? So the top way to not feel like you're using somebody as a ladder is to not use them as a ladder. So that's very helpful to do that. But the second thing I would say is you don't actually have to worry about it too much. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen if you ask for a hand from someone? They might say no. And maybe there will be a brief moment where they think, oh, I can't believe somebody's asking me for a favor again. I can't do it right now. And then they'll say no, and then they'll never think about you again. And that's fine. I cannot remember anybody that I have said, I can't do it right now too. I usually say yes to people. I only say no when like I genuinely don't have the time or energy. And I've forgotten. I don't have any negative feelings towards any of those people. So it honestly doesn't matter. Like, you can just ask, and the worst that happens is that somebody says no, and that's fine. And it's actually good when somebody says no, because that means they're looking after their boundaries. So it's a nice way to model you looking after yours, or they're in the same situation. Keep requests simple and direct. You don't need to apologize. You don't need to couch it in a load of okay if not. You don't need to do all of that. I mean, you can, but it's just a kind of rote performance. It's totally fine to write to somebody and say, I wonder if you would consider looking at my book and offering a blurb for it. I like your work and I'd really value what you think on it. Be nice. That's it. That's all it takes. Short emails. Everyone loves short emails. Everyone hates long emails. Just write a short email and don't worry if somebody says no. That's my advice.
Yeah, I would say the same, as well as choose who you're asking. Don't just choose someone that you think is great, but has no connection to your work. So, and then articulate that maybe, I think, I love your work because of X, and I think you might find my work interesting because it's about Y. Again, short, Josie's right. And I wonder, and you're one of my favorite writers, and I wonder, or whatever it is. And also what Josie said, most people start, and perhaps it's foolish, I usually assume that people start from a good place, with good intentions. And so, I asked a bunch of people, some of them said no because they were busy, and that was okay. And as Josie says, I'm sure they won't remember me, or in fact, a couple have said, I'm really sorry I wasn't able to do that. And I was glad that they were looking after themselves. So just ask. Yeah, I think just ask. And mostly people will try and help if they can, especially if it's about a project. Book blurbs, I think, are complicated because they take a lot of time. And it just depends on the moment you've caught someone and the minute that they are in their lives. If they're about to go on holiday, they might want to read your book on holiday, or they might not be able to. But I think projects are more qualified and different. And I think that's about saying, I need a half an hour to ask you about whether it's EDI or how much funding I ask or how I formulate this particular thing. So consider your audience, I would say too.
I don't know if I've really got anything else to add to that, apart from the first few times you ask, you're going to feel really nervous and anxious about it. Because that's been me recently, asking, like, even people that, that I see as friends and colleagues. It's just it's been a new thing for me, so I've had to push myself out of my comfort zone to do that, and I'm really glad I did. So that's the only thing. You're going to feel a bit awkward about it, but that's okay. That's normal.
I've thought of two other things. First other thing, pet hate. Don't message them on Facebook. Don't message them on Instagram. Send an email. Maybe the culture is going to change. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I'm nearly 40. I don't know. I don't know how things work anymore. The thing that makes me most likely to say no to somebody is if they message me on Facebook about it. And I just want to be emailed. It's a solved problem. And then because that's my social space, that's my friendship, it's not my workspace. That's why. And the second thing is, if somebody doesn't reply, don't follow up with them on another platform, and maybe don't even follow up with them on the same platform. Just let it go. Like maybe one follow-up email being like, wondered if you'd had a chance to look at this. Maybe. But like, it's okay if they don't reply. Some people are busy, some people are grumpy, and that's all right as well. Those are my other two quick things.
And if you're a Scorpio like me, nagging just makes you more unlikely to do the thing that someone's nagging you to do anyway. Horrible personality trait. You did beautifully bring us on to the issue of social media though, Josie. And this is something we were kind of discussing a little bit before the event as well, but people often ask questions about building a social media following early on in their writing career or in their artistic career generally, because we've been so steeped in it for so long. And I think there's this strange narrative that's built up that you won't get a book deal or an agent unless you have like 20,000, 30,000, 500,000 Twitter or Instagram followers. And from every publicist or agent I've spoken to, that's not true at all. Like if you are a social media star, you're probably going to sell a book, but it doesn't mean that you won't. And I think we're all kind of aware of the pros and cons of being on social media generally, but I wonder if we have any thoughts on kind of social media as a community building tool, and when it might become more negative than positive.
I want to just talk a little bit about Open Book, the charity I run, and its role on socials, which is to reach out to people who might not otherwise have access, I would say, I want to start positively because I think it might go downhill from here. And, the Facebook groups that we have at Open Book help people connect to communities sort of more geographically disparate in a way than they might otherwise be. So for closed groups like the People of Color group or the chronically ill group, or there's a neurodivergent group, there are groups that you might not be able to find if you go to your library. But if you use socials in that way, I think it really has that benefit of allowing you to connect the dots across the world, really, which is really wonderful. So I think in that sense, if you're using it in that way, it's really important. But I think it has to be an organic thing, you know, in terms of building the people that you want to be communicating with. It's a bit like how you build your little tiny crit group. Who do you want to be in conversation with? And being careful not to include people that you don't want to be in conversation with, because that always ends badly. And it takes a huge amount of energy and time and space away from your life and your writing.
Yeah, I would like to say in terms of at the Scottish BPOC Writers Network, yeah, social media is like it's another facet of how we're reaching potentially new members as well as like the wider public. We've got like a closed Facebook group as well where everyone in there, there's a lot of people that are sharing things that they're doing or a friend is doing, and that's been really beautiful to have that space. So there can be some really good aspects to it. I think as well from a personal perspective, like as an individual writer, the amount of time it takes up can be significant, and so whether it's like limiting how many platforms you're on, or sometimes, there's been times where I've actually taken all the apps off my phone and only used them on like my laptop, so that's been a way to sort of have a bit of a break. Or even I've even sort of said I'm going to be away for like 3 months, which turned into 6. So, I think it's okay to go, even if you are on social media, you don't have to be there constantly. It can be sporadic. But I have found real benefit in terms of, because I am in and at home more than I am out in the world. I have found, different kind of online platforms have been a great way for me to connect with other people and other creatives.
Josie, might you have any thoughts?
You know what? I'm gonna not be super negative. Readers, I left Twitter. But I'm not gonna be super negative about it. I do think we need to be careful. I think Jeda and Marjorie have spoken to this really well about distinguishing between community building and advertising. And those are like two different things. And they've both spoken about like actual community building efforts, which is using the tools that are available to us, which can include big social media platforms, to create spaces of conversation, and actual human to human interaction, and those are really important. And then there's the other thing, which is advertising. And the one thing I do still use social media for is advertising. I poured 10 years of my life into Twitter and built up enough of a following. I'm even though it poisoned my brain, I'm not going to delete it. I'm going to use that and just tweet when I have a book out, and that's why I haven't deleted my account. But that's not community building. That's advertising to people. Something I would say about using social media is you can't do all of it. There's too much of it. There's so much of it. You can't run a Twitter and an Instagram and a TikTok, and you can't do all that, and a good mail. You can't do all of that. If you like it, if there's something in all of that mess that you like, just do that thing and don't do all the other things. Because as Marjorie says, like building a social media following has to happen organically. Nobody follows somebody who just tweets, I'm doing a gig next week. I have a new book out next month. Look at me, look at me, look at me. No, nobody follows that. People are engaging with people that they have an interest in for other reasons. Maybe it's because they're good at taking really pretty selfies. So if that's your bag, like do that and go on Instagram. Maybe it's because they're really good at one-liners. Like if that's your bag, go on Twitter and do that until it crashes in a burning fire. Maybe they follow you because you're really mouthy and political, which you could probably do on any of those platforms, actually. If you just do the one that you the one that you like, and that's the thing to focus on. But don't do it as a job. Like, don't do it because you think you're supposed to. Don't do it because writers are supposed to have a social media profile, because it won't work and it will waste your time. And you're much better off just spending the time writing. And that's the final piece of advice. If you want to build a social media following for your writing, write some really good writing and then share it. and share that with the world. Share some of it freely share lots of it freely with the world. And if people like it, they'll follow you because they want more of it. So yeah, writing is the best way to get a social media following as a writer, not the other way around. Sorry, but that's the way around it actually works.
Can I jump into and just say my 2 cents, which is try and be kind? I think but that goes for all of the social media engagement, but the more I'm on it, the more I realize anything that you're about to write that's unkind, no matter how angry or personal it is, it's just never a good idea. It's better just to click the icon off and go away, because actually it just follows you and it eats your energy in a way, and it doesn't help your writing at all.
Sorry, I was muted there. I think there's a lot to be said as a kind of summary of what we've all said, I think, for figuring out what works for you. So it doesn't have to be Twitter, it might be on a Discord channel, it might be Instagram, it might be TikTok if you like making videos, but I think you have to know that you can, the minute something stops working for you, you can stop it. The minute going on a social media platform makes you feel anxious and horrible and it's taking time, you know, if you feel it's a problem or it's a compulsion or someone, you know, it's just not working for you, you actually don't need to have it. You know, once you become published as well, you will have a team whose job is to sell your work. So you don't even need to be on there for advertising if you don't need to. But yeah, I think that we could speak for another 2 hours on social media. But before, we do have the question answer function is open for your questions. But I just wanted to touch on, we've talked, well, Jeda, you've mentioned a little bit about the challenges of kind of being mostly housebound, or if you're housebound for a period, or I think the kind of access needs for people who might have like energy limiting conditions or disabilities often overlaps with people who are based rurally or aren't in a place where they can access these in-person things that we're talking about. It's not as easy to go for coffee with someone. It's not as easy to go to a book launch. Can you speak a little bit about how you found kind of the online world to be helpful in that regard?
So I think it's been good to kind of, let's say with Facebook, I don't really use it apart from some of the groups that I'm in. So actually I use it more just for that, you know, for connecting in the groups, because it's the word asynchronous, so people are, you know, there at different times. So yeah, that's been one way. And then I think on a lot of, you know, on most of the social media platforms, there will be, you know, people with, you know, various lived experiences, and you know, that can be really helpful in terms of thinking about who you're following, and you know what you want to be seeing, you know, in your feed coming up, and you know, and how, you know, positive or negative that is in terms of reflecting your own experience, and connecting with others, and you know, essentially it's more about, I suppose, on the more public platforms, although you can have a private, you know, there's folk that keep their profiles private, which is also totally fine to do, and then you know, it's just through commenting, and you know, and then someone might be like, oh, send me a message, like invite you to like sort of, you know, send them a message individually, and there are groups. So say, for example, there's I mentioned Crypt Collective already, that's specifically for writers across the UK that are disabled. And when I say disabled, I mean, I'm talking like in the widest possible terms, deaf, chronically ill, neurodivergent, you know, I'm just kind of putting that under one banner for time. And there's also disability arts online. So I think one of the things I've benefited from is being in spaces that are multidisciplinary arts. So it's really nice, obviously, to have space where you're connecting specifically with writers and sometimes with, you know, a particular genre that you're working in. But it has always, I find as well, to have some multidisciplinary space where it's, you know, people working in different art forms, and that kind of, you know, you can kind of feed each other from a creative perspective that way, which is really nice. And just, you know, like sharing, you know, a really important part of the sort of community building aspect is sharing and celebrating other people and what they're doing. I think that's, you know, quite important to be like, wherever your kind of journey is going, you're kind of trying to bring some people with you, and you know, you're all going on your individual journeys, but you know, you can kind of share part of that together. So yeah, I think it's really important to like uplift others and sort of share and celebrate what other people are doing.
Thank you so much for that. I also think it's people should realize as well that they can use Zoom in a way that they would use going to the coffee shop as well. Like I've had people email me before and say, would you be open to having like a half-hour coffee with me over Zoom, because I want to ask you a specific thing. And I've always found that to actually be really lovely. You don't have to walk to the coffee shop around the corner. You know, it kind of can be used for all kinds of things. And you know, there's people, ask people and they can only say no, right? That's the worst thing that can happen. I'm going to, oh, sorry, Marjorie, go on.
I was just going to add that the Open Book has a whole set of online sessions that I would, that are always free to attend for this purpose exactly, so that we get people who wouldn't, although we do have some groups in like Ullapool and Coyach and really interesting rural locations. But the idea is that you should be able to zoom in from wherever you are. And even on Shetland, for example, our Lerwick group meets online because the distances involved are so big, you know, that people don't want to drive the hour. Since COVID have worked out, it's easier to meet online. So look for an online community if you're in a rural setting. And then when you find people who are not that far from you, ask them if they want to be in a crit group with you, you know, and join up if you can that way, or just do it online once a month with a few people that you like. But yeah, look for those online communities because they do exist.
Thank you so much. We're gonna slide seamlessly into audience questions now. And we've got a good few, so apologies if we don't make it to your question, but we have got 3 questions on one topic, which is Substack. So one question says, do we really need a Substack? One question says, how helpful are you all finding following writers' Substacks? And what do you think about a Substack as a place to build community around topics you're writing about?
Yes, Substacks, or as we used to call it, blogging. It's literally the same thing. They just put a brand name on a blog. That's all it is. It's just blogging. It's just blogging. It's blogging without a website. What's going on here? That's my nut. Anyway, I subscribe to several writers' Substacks. Writers I really admire, and I never read them because they land in my email inbox where there's so much work to do every day. And so I just click the archive button because I really like inbox 0. And I'm being really honest about this because that's what happens to a vast amount of Substacks. If you like writing in a diaristic way, or if you like a regular writing to a group of people, if that's something that you enjoy, do that on a blog, which might be called Substack. Do you remember RSS feeders? That's what Substack is. It's an RSS feed from a blog. Anyway, You could do it on a blog, or you could do it on a Substack if that's something that you'd like. If that's some kind of writing discipline that you enjoy, that makes you feel good, and it's an art form in itself, and you'll get better at it, and you'll develop a following because people like your writing. But no, you don't have to have one. I think it's good for you to have some form of hustle. I think most writers need some form of hustle in order, or they have to be really incredibly good. That's the other hustle you can have, is being an absolute genius. Some writers' hustle is being extremely good at social networking events, like in person with drinks and little sandwiches. Those give me the heebie-jeebies. I can't do them. I cannot get. So I got quite good at Twitter, and that worked for me. It got me some work for a good decade. It was good for me. That was my hustle for a while, was that I was reasonably good at Twitter. But you don't have to have all the hustles, which is what I said earlier. So no, you don't need a Substack. But if you like a Substack, do it. And sure, experiment with a blog. Experiment with a blog. But maybe you'll close it in a year, or maybe it will turn out to be a central part of your writing life, and both of those things are fine.
I had the same question a little while ago, and I might or might not have asked someone on the panel about their Substack. But to try and work out whether I needed one, because I thought I need one. Everybody, so many people have one, and they kept landing in my inbox. And then I realized the solution to that was to take them all out of my inbox and to unsubscribe, even from people that I love their writing and their books, and I read and reread it. And for now, it's not for me, it's that question of, do I have the time and space to do this on any regular format, whether it's once a month or every 2 weeks or every week? And the answer is no, just now. And so rather than make myself feel nervous when they all land, I unsubscribe from everybody. So for me at the moment, the answer is no. And I've just had to take myself off of all the lovely writing that pops in, because it just makes me feel like I'm missing out or anxious that I should be doing it. Maybe that's not the right answer, Heather, sorry. Jeda, over to you.
I've got medium answer. So I don't subscribe to I do subscribe to way too many things, but in terms of writers, whether it's a news, so some people have like a newsletter, and which is, I suppose, it's a bit different from Substack, because that's more like blogging. But it's this, it's a similar kind of thing. I think if you're wanting to maybe have a particular subject or topic that you want to talk about regularly, or if, for example, some people might talk about like the writing process, like the sort of behind the scenes stuff, and they quite enjoy doing that. And yeah, I think for me, I do have a newsletter, like with a subscription form, but I'm been struggling to find the time to actually write those newsletters, and then I feel really guilty. But in terms of people that I subscribe to that are writers, like I don't manage to, read them all at all, but occasionally I will. And there's maybe one or two people that I have, because you can have like the free version, or there's like a paid version that sometimes, I don't know, it's like £30 for the year or something. And if I've been in a position to, that's been a way to kind of, financially support in a small way another author. So I've occasionally done that. But there's other platforms like that do similar types of things. One thing I think, because in my sort of former life, I did do quite a lot of marketing, including online marketing for clients. And in terms of sort of newsletters, I think it's about, I suppose, committing to the time of a particular task. And it's going to be impossible to do all of those things. It might look like, some big authors doing, but there's a good chance they've got an assistant that's doing like a lot of that for them, to be quite frank. But for the vast majority of us that are all just having to like DIY, I think it's about choosing one or two things. So you definitely don't need to have a Substack, or for me, I have a website and I post there the most regularly, as opposed to doing like a newsletter type of thing. So
what I think we're saying is, again, it's what works for you, isn't it? So like, I started a Substack because I wanted to bring a writing practice back into my kind of like work week where it had been removed, and develop an essay writing practice, and that was really good for me. And also, I actually love getting the emails, because when I go and make myself a cup of tea or a coffee, I'll read that instead of going on Twitter. For me, it was kind of like a way of focusing myself more on writing and other people's writing, and learning about how to make the best lemon drizzle cake, or listening to reading Toby Litt's kind of daily writing kind of journal thing. So yeah, for you that might be Patreon as well. People build communities on Patreon still. It might be a different thing. It might be a website. It might be a Discord channel. Whatever is working for you, that's the correct thing, I think. And unfortunately, we've only got a couple of more minutes before we have to hand over to Kirstine, so I can't get to everyone's questions, but I do have one that I hope we can answer kind of quickly. And that is, we mentioned about returning favors or passing it on, but that might be hard for new emerging writers to think about how to do that, or what value they can give when they're at the start of their career. Do we have any quick practical tips for people who are in that position?
Sure, I think I was the one that said that. So something I should be clear about is I didn't necessarily mean pass it on immediately. I also meant pass it on like in 10 years' time. Like, one of the reasons that I almost always say yes to a favor, don't everyone turn in for my email inbox right now, because then I won't be able to. But one of the reasons I almost always say yes to a favor is because lots of people said yes to me when I was starting on. So I was talking about passing it on later on. But the other thing I would say is that everyone has value right now, and there's all sorts of useful things that you can do. And if somebody who's a lot further on in their career has just done a big favor for you, there might not be something useful you can do for them right now, but there might be something useful you can do for other people in your writing community right now. So that's also what I meant about passing it on. However, it is still nice to say, and if there's anything I can do for you, please just ask. Like, that's a nice thing to say. That's kind of what I'm talking about. But yeah, give generously and receive generously as well.
Do you have anything else? I think just going to people's events is a huge thing, and often, whether that's an online event or an in-person event, I think especially with book launches, people can feel really awkward if they aren't in a position to buy someone's book, but actually just being there in their audience and bringing your great vibes to an event is a huge thing as well.
And in the last couple of events I've done, I've had a couple of people come up with the program and ask me to sign the program as a way of talking, because they couldn't afford to buy the book. And I felt so chuffed that someone had stood in a queue without the book and had the bravery to be like, I just want to chat to you about this, and could you sign the program, or whatever it was that they had with them. So please don't be afraid of doing that. We want to talk to the people who've come. We want to talk to people who've read the book and appreciated it, or didn't, and had something else to say. So never feel like you have to buy the book. The presence, I think, matters much more.
Good vibes and a smiling face is all anyone can ever ask of you, I think. And on that note, I think we should hand back over to Kirstine. Guys, thank you so much. It's been such lovely to hear your thoughts and share this conversation with you.
And what a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much, Heather, and to Harry, Josephine, Marjorie and Jeda for a really open and sensitively discussed conversation. And thank you to the audience for all your questions and comments. And if you're watching the recording, please do let us know your thoughts below the video. Thanks again to Creative Scotland, Hawthornden Foundation and Society of Authors and the team at Moniac Moore. Just to reiterate, if anyone joined late, the recordings will be available through Moniac Moore's website and YouTube channel in a few weeks with BSL interpretation, and all links and books discussed here will be included with the transcript of that recording, and we'll notify everyone in the live audience once that's available. So as we've said, these events are part of an ongoing development of resources around the theme. So even if your specific question wasn't answered, Moniac will be using all the questions to feed into programme development and also look at how we can build what resources we have available to share with people as well and support throughout the journey of a life of a book. And that goes for those watching the recording too. So again, you know, if you've got any comments, please do let us know. Before we finish, I would just like to let you know that Harry Josephine is leading an evening surgery of one-to-ones as the final event in this programme. And I think there are still 2 places remaining on the website, unless they've gone while we've been chatting. And also Marjorie is running some beautiful writers' retreats in Galloway. And I think there's she has spaces in her November retreat later in the year. So do have a look at her website for that. So thank you again, Heather Parry, Harry Josephine Giles, Marjorie Lotfi and Jeda Pearl, and to all of you for joining us.